Oprah Winfrey does not do small things. Every word she says in public is a choice. Every appearance is calculated. Every silence has a meaning. So when Oprah, the woman who handed Meghan Markle the most powerful microphone in the world, starts going quiet, starts looking away, starts letting her name slip into a joke on a podcast, people who understand how Hollywood really works know exactly what that means. It means the friendship is over. It means something happened behind closed doors that the cameras never saw. And it means that what you are about to find out has been building for a very long time. This is not a story about a royal feud. This is a story about trust. About what happens when one of the most powerful women in America realizes she was used. And about the slow, deliberate, completely devastating way Oprah Winfrey has chosen to respond. Let's go back to the beginning, because that is where the first crack appeared. It was March 2021. The world had been locked in its homes for nearly a year. People were anxious, exhausted, and desperate for something to feel. And then CBS announced that Meghan, the Duchess of Sussex, would be sitting down with Oprah Winfrey for a tell-all interview. No palace minders. No approved questions. No rules. Just two women in a sunlit garden in California, and 2 hours of television that the world could not look away from. 61 million people watched. It became one of the most talked about interviews in the history of television. Meghan wept. She described feeling alone, unprotected, abandoned by a family and an institution that refused to help her. She said she had experienced suicidal thoughts during her time as a working royal. She said that before her baby was born, a member of the royal family had raised concerns about the color of her child's skin. She said that Catherine, the Princess of Wales, had been the one who caused tears at a bridesmaid dress fitting, not her, as had been widely reported. The audience was shattered. Social media exploded. The palace issued a careful, measured response. 5 words tucked near the end of that statement did the most damage of all. Some recollections may vary. That was it. That was the monarchy's answer to 2 hours of accusations delivered in front of the world. And for a few weeks, Meghan's version of events stood almost completely unchallenged. Then the people who check things for a living started checking. What they found was not one mistake. It was not one misremembered detail from a stressful period of life. What they found, layer by layer, was a pattern. A very specific pattern of stories that had been shaped, adjusted, and in some cases invented entirely, and then delivered on the most watched interview platform on earth. Start with something small. During the interview, Meghan described a moment in the royal car during her first joint engagement with Queen Elizabeth II. She said the Queen had noticed she was cold and reached over and placed a blanket across her knees. It was a tender image. A grandmother's instinct. She placed it deliberately next to her stories about being frozen out by the institution, to show that the Queen herself had been warm toward her. It was effective. People remembered it. Analysts pulled the footage from that specific day and went through it frame by frame. The Queen placed the blanket over her own lap. Meghan sat beside her with her arms crossed. No shared blanket. No quiet gesture of warmth. It had not happened. This was not a small error. You do not misremember someone placing a blanket over your lap. That is either a true memory or it is not. Then came something far larger. During the interview, Meghan told Oprah that 3 days before the grand public wedding at Windsor Castle, the one watched by 1.9 billion people around the world, she and Harry had already privately exchanged their real vows. Just the two of them, she said, in their backyard, with the Archbishop of Canterbury present. She described the Windsor ceremony as a performance put on for the world. The real marriage, she implied, was the one no one had seen. There was one immediate problem. Under English law, a private exchange of words in a garden has no legal standing whatsoever. A marriage requires two witnesses, a licensed venue, and an official authorized to perform the ceremony in that specific location. None of those conditions existed in any backyard. The Archbishop of Canterbury's office was forced to issue a public clarification. The Archbishop confirmed that the only wedding he had any part in was the public ceremony at Windsor on the Saturday. He stated that he had signed the wedding certificate, which is a legal document, and that he would have committed a serious criminal offense if he had signed it knowing it to be false. He was a senior churchman publicly protecting himself, on the record, from being associated with Meghan's claim. That is how far removed from reality the story had been. But it was the headline segment of the interview that told the most complete story about how this operation had been constructed. Oprah showed a montage of British newspaper headlines on screen. The montage was presented as evidence, hard, printed, undeniable proof that the British press had run a sustained and racist campaign against Meghan that had made her life unbearable. The message was clear, here it is in black and white, their own words, the reason she had no choice but to leave. Researchers who went back through those headlines after the interview aired found several things that should never have survived a basic fact check. One headline shown as part of the racist British press campaign had come from an article about Meghan's communication style, specifically, the writer's complaint that she used corporate wellness language. It had nothing to do with race. More critically, that article had been published in December 2020, 11 months after Harry and Meghan had already publicly announced their departure from royal life. It could not possibly have contributed to forcing them out. They were already gone when it was written. Associated Newspapers, the publisher behind the Daily Mail, sent legal letters to both CBS and Oprah's production company, Harpo Productions, after the broadcast. Those letters documented 3 specific instances where Daily Mail headlines had been altered before being shown on screen, and 9 separate cases where headlines from publications outside the United Kingdom, foreign magazines, overseas websites had been inserted into the montage without any indication that they were not British. In other words, non-British headlines had been presented as British press racism, unaltered, on primetime television. Harpo Productions refused to make any corrections. Their response was a single sentence: they stood by the broadcast in its entirety. 61 million people had watched what was framed as undeniable evidence of a racist British press campaign. That evidence had been curated. Some of it had been altered. Some of it had been written after the couple had already left. Several items had not even come from Britain. And Oprah's own company looked at all of that and said, "We stand by it." Inside Harpo Productions, that decision was not made without discomfort. Nobody talks loudly about what happened before that interview went to air. But this much became clear over the months that followed. Meghan's team had requested the ability to review the edit before it was broadcast. In professional journalism, that request does not exist. You do not give your interview subject the power to review the cut, reshape the framing, and adjust the story before the world sees it. That is not an interview. It is a press release with a garden backdrop. Oprah Winfrey had spent decades interviewing presidents, world leaders, and the most powerful people alive. She had never granted that to anyone. When the request came in, something shifted for Oprah. She had not been chosen as an interviewer. She had been chosen as a vehicle. The realization was not loud. There was no confrontation, no dramatic moment. It was the kind of cold clarity that very experienced people sometimes reach quietly, alone, when no one else is watching. But there was something else. Something personal that Meghan had shared with Oprah off camera. Meghan had confided, privately, that at certain royal gatherings she had deliberately refused to curtsy to Queen Elizabeth II. Not because she felt it was culturally inappropriate, but because, she said, she felt it was beneath her as an American woman. And she had laughed about it with friends afterward. To most people, that might sound like small rebelliousness. But to Oprah, a woman who had spent decades reading people for a living, who could hear what someone was not saying as clearly as what they were. It was deeply revealing. Because a woman who could sit in a sunlit garden and speak with raw, tearful emotion about the pain of feeling unsupported by the royal family, while privately laughing about disrespecting the Queen at her own private gatherings, was not a woman sharing her truth. She was a woman performing it. And from that moment, Oprah was watching differently. What happened next in Hollywood unfolded the way it always does when powerful people decide someone is no longer worth protecting. Not loudly. Not publicly. Through silence. Through carefully chosen absences. Through the jokes that are only made once someone has lost the room. Bill Simmons, the head of podcast innovation at Spotify, the man who had been paid to make Harry and Meghan's $20 million deal work, went on his own podcast after Spotify ended the partnership and called them, on the record, grifters. He described a Zoom call with Harry, during which he had tried to help him develop a podcast concept, with open contempt, saying it was one of his best stories. He was not a tabloid columnist. He was the person whose job had been to build their media brand, laughing about the experience publicly. At a major industry conference, the CEO of one of the biggest talent agencies in Hollywood stood in front of the most powerful people in the entertainment business and said, flatly, that Meghan Markle was not a great audio talent, or necessarily any kind of talent. These were not royal commentators. These were the American executives who had taken the Sussex money, tried to build with them, and walked away with nothing but frustration and very good stories to tell at conferences. Netflix, which had committed a reported $100 million to Archwell Productions, found out about the Oprah interview from a headline. Not from a phone call. Not from an email. From the news. The company funding the empire had not been told. In nearly 6 years of partnership, Archwell had not produced a single scripted project, no fictional film, no drama series, nothing that had made it from a meeting room to a screen. By early 2025, Netflix ended the exclusive deal and replaced it with a first-look agreement. That distinction matters enormously in Hollywood. An exclusive deal means a studio is committed to you. A first-look agreement means they will glance at your ideas before you take them elsewhere, but they are making no promises and writing no checks. It is the industry's polite way of saying, the relationship is over. Please take your things. And through all of it, Oprah watched. And went quiet. The clearest sign came in late 2025, on a podcast hosted by Kelly Ripa. Someone asked Oprah, in a lighthearted moment, what she would do if someone gave her baby chicks as a gift. Oprah laughed and said she would run them straight over to the Sussexes. But the way it came out, stumbled over, mispronounced in a way that turned their royal title into something the whole room laughed at, was not accidental. Oprah Winfrey is one of the most media-trained people alive. She does not make accidental slips in recorded settings. She turned Harry and Meghan into a punchline. And everyone in that room laughed along with her. When Meghan's 2025 birthday came around, the celebration was small and controlled. Oprah was not there. Not in the photo. Not mentioned. Not tagged. For a friendship that had appeared central to their post-royal identity, the friendship that had produced the interview that launched everything, her absence required no translation. When Meghan launched her lifestyle brand, she reportedly sent Oprah her signature curated gift basket. Monogrammed items. Artisan honey. The full treatment. Oprah did not post. Did not acknowledge it. Said nothing. In the world Meghan had chosen to operate in, silence from someone with Oprah's platform is not neutral. It is a verdict. Then, on a separate occasion, Oprah was asked to name her closest friends. She named people who had been in her life for decades. Meghan Markle was not mentioned. Not even in passing. The people you name when someone asks about your inner circle are the people who matter to you. Meghan was not named. By April 2026, 5 years after the night in that Santa Barbara garden, Harry and Meghan traveled to Australia for what their team described as a private philanthropic visit. Hospital visits, mental health summits, meetings with veterans and first responders. But newspaper editors and royal commentators looked at the itinerary and called it what it appeared to be, a faux royal tour designed to shore up a brand that was running out of road. A poll taken during the visit found that 4 out of every 5 British people opposed the Sussexes using their royal titles for commercial purposes. And then came the moment that said everything that needed to be said. On a morning in Sydney, Harry and Meghan visited Bondi Beach to meet survivors of a terrorist attack that had occurred there the previous December. A woman named Jessica Chapnick Khan, who had shielded her 5-year-old daughter with her own body during the attack, stood on that beach and let Meghan embrace her. Meghan held her hands. The cameras captured every second. The coverage was respectful. The emotion appeared real. Within minutes of leaving that beach, before the survivors had even finished speaking to journalists, every single item of clothing Meghan had worn that morning appeared for sale on a fashion platform in which she holds both an investor stake and a commission arrangement. The shirt she had worn while embracing a terror survivor, listed. The jeans, listed. The trainers, the sunglasses, the bag, all listed, all shoppable, all generating commission for the Duchess of Sussex while the woman she had just held was still sitting on that beach. The reaction was immediate. The original listing was quietly deleted after the backlash erupted. It was replaced with a different image, one in which Harry had been removed from the frame entirely. That detail, almost missed in the outrage, was somehow the most telling of all. Harry was not innocent in any of this. He had made his choices with both eyes open. He had walked away from a country, a crown, and a family, and he had done it for a life and a woman and a version of himself that he believed in completely. By the spring of 2026, he was standing at a memorial to victims of a terrorist attack in Sydney, cropped out of a fashion advertisement, watching the empire they had built together from that one night in Oprah's garden continue to fall apart around him. The interview that was supposed to set them free had become the thing they could not escape. Every deal that had come apart, every door that had closed, every powerful name that had gone quiet could be traced back to that night. Because the interview had not just been a story. It had been a promise. A promise of honesty, of authenticity, of a realness that people were hungry to believe in. And when that promise turned out to be something else entirely, the people who had believed it the hardest felt it the most. Oprah Winfrey understood better than anyone what had been lost. Not just the friendship. Not just the professional trust. Something quieter and harder to name. She had given Meghan the most valuable thing she owned, her platform, her credibility, the audience that had spent decades trusting her to tell them the truth. And that trust had been handed back to her, piece by piece, as the checkers and the fact-finders and the legal letters arrived and the story began to come apart. In Hollywood, powerful people do not always say when they have been wronged. Sometimes they simply stop saying the name. Sometimes they let a title come out slightly wrong on a podcast and let the room fill with laughter and leave it at that. And sometimes, the most powerful statement a person can make is the one they choose not to make at all. The garden in Santa Barbara still exists. The chickens still have their freshly painted sign. But the friendship that was photographed there, the alliance that launched a media empire, the partnership that was supposed to change everything, that is gone. And the woman who handed over the microphone has made her peace with knowing exactly how it happened. The only question that remains is whether the two people who sat in that garden on that night have made their peace with it too.